Well, good afternoon, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope podcast, and I'm your host, Danielle Richardson. And I'm very excited today. I'm getting to speak with Dave Pelzer. Um, now, some of my audience may know who Dave is, another majority may not, the younger folks, but Dave actually wrote what became a New York Times bestseller called A Child Called It, about his growing up years. And he's written eight other books that became New York Times bestsellers. Um, and he also received the National Jefferson Award. Um, and since then, I mean, Dave's spoken a lot of places. He's traveled a lot. We were just talking about that before starting to record. Things are slowing down a little bit for him now. Um, but he's made a huge impact in several people's lives by sharing his story, which is a very painful story, but also there's redemption, there's forgiveness. So it's not. I hope this episode for those listening will be able to find encouragement in his story from the hard that he experienced, but also from how he's processed it and written about it. So, Dave, first of all, thanks so much for taking the time. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
And thank you. And it's weird because I have to say this in a philosophical sense, is I never thought I'd get here. Because I really thought, one, my situation, my mother was very broken. And for whatever reason, analogy, she selected me as a very young person. I was maybe 3 or 4 when this started, the abuse. And it was considered one of the worst cases in California's history because there at the time, wasn't laws to protect children or those trying to protect children. And I was physically rescued at age 12 after living in a basement on and off for about 8 years. And I remember being in foster care and I didn't talk because my mother did not allow me to speak in her house. And because I swallowed ammonia twice in 24 hours, so my larynx and esophagus are, at odds with each other. And I remember this, and I was out of place. I was an alien that was beamed on planet Earth. I had nothing, no
Yeah.
social skills and eating or hygiene, anything. And I remember I was in foster care for about a year and a half, and this doctor, and it's going to make me sound old, but he resembled the character from Doc Brown from Back to the Future, the wispy hair, and he would talk like this, and he basically told my foster mother, I had one side of me and my social worker on the other side of me. They said there was just no chance in hell. I was
Mm.
isolated too. I was abused too much, tortured too much, and there is no chance in hell that this person is going to be a normal person within our society. And then he kind of went on to say that death or prison, that's the only options I had. And
Wow.
yet, I'll say this for your audience, and I pray that they listen and take this. I'm the most blessed person I know. I am an amateur psychological voyeur. I'm always thinking, study Walt Disney, study Robin Williams, study Henry Ford, study President Truman, or I study Timothy McVeigh, Saddam Hussein, Mussolini, Hitler, because I want to find out what made those people do things. And after studying all these people, and you're talking thousands of books later, I've had more adventures than Indiana Jones or Tom Cruise combined, for goodness sakes. I went from the worst case of child abuse to the California Volunteer of the Year in my state. Um, I didn't talk for 14 years, and now you just can't shut me up. And I do
Well,
comedy and impersonations. I had no coordination, but I was allowed to fly for the Air Force. I didn't have a voice. And I remember when I was a kid, the boys wanted to be baseball players or astronauts. I wanted to be a writer because when I lived in the basement, I would read all these adventure books, and I wanted to be that adventurous writer. And I think the book that changed my life was Mice and Men, given to me by one of my teachers. And I just loved Steinbeck because with Steinbeck, you were living the experience with him, with the characters.
yeah.
And the first book, as you mentioned, it was the number one book in the world. And I'm probably more in awe of that now rather than because I was very busy trying to, do in-service training, or I hold the rank of chief, so I visit military bases and do comedy or go to Iraq in the summertime, for goodness sakes.
Well,
And when
just for people listening, what date was it when you said it was the most popular book in the world? Just so give some
Oh my
perspective on
goodness, I
time.
want to say the year because it was on the New York Times for 6 years,
Yeah.
which is a record. I want to say maybe 2000 or 2001. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And I didn't know what that. went because I was so busy doing this. And then when I slowed down and the ultimate fantasy, I became a firefighter at age 52. And a few years later, I'm a fire captain, not in one district, but two districts. And then, we had that fake news, COVID. Yeah, I don't think that was fake, and I was running back and forth between the two districts and I was working 7 days a week. And
Hmm.
now that I'm slowing down, I'm still busy. And, I got this from Mr. Schwarzenegger. I watched one of his programs, and he says, when you get to a certain age, you have to stay physically, mentally, and spiritually busy because otherwise you just stop and boom, that's it. And I think at the age, because of my age and experience and doing, I feel like I'm an ambassador now, trying to look for greatness. There's Andy Rooney said it. He says, I'm always looking for greatness. And often months go by. And as I was telling you, and your audience needs to really receive this, you're a very young lady, you're very busy, and you're smart as can be, for goodness sakes. And the work that you're doing now, imagine how that's going to pay off 2 or 3 generations from now, because we need people with strong leadership values. They don't have to say how great they are, they don't have to say they walk on water, but to provide other people with information that might be pertinent and that can change their lives and the lives of their children's children. And I do believe this. I owe my life to my teachers and my social workers and my foster parents and a young police officer that took me into custody.
Hmm.
And you're on a show one time, and a very popular host says, "Oh my God, you've got all these awards. You're not in my book club, and you're doing phenomenal. Your parents must be so proud." And the audience gasped because they knew my story, obviously. And I smiled at the host. I said, "Yes, my foster parents and my social workers and my teachers are most proud of me." And if you remember too, with the first book, A Child Called It, the first two books was actually dedicated to my teachers. And I will say this with love in my heart. I've met a few celebrities, and when you do comedy, everybody says, "Do my voice" type thing. And they say, "What's your biggest celebrity photo?" And it's the photo of my teachers on the exact day of the 20-year anniversary of my rescue. And I gave them the first printed copies of A Child Called It.
Hmm. Wow.
I believe in honor. I am affable and I make fun of things and whatever, but I have a strong sense of honor because I know, and this is important for your audience, I know exactly where I came from and how bad it could have been. So I am
Yeah.
one lucky person.
Well, the majority of my audience being from my generation probably have not read your book. So can you kind of give, as much as you want to share, can you talk about your growing up years and what that was like, what you remember?
I,
Um,
I, I think I have to say, to be honest, because I don't like people who are overly flamboyant or, they sugarcoat it or they just make things up. I'm probably more scared now than I was back then because you can put a child in a room and after a few minutes, that child will adjust. They'll make a fort, they'll take a nap, they'll do something.
yeah,
You take away someone's cell phone and they go crazy in 2 minutes, in a sense. So I'm trying to convey everything that happened to me happened at the right time. And I call that tumblers, when things connect at a certain time. I was always afraid of my mother, and I always knew I was in trouble, even though the two other brothers and I were just goofing around. So that's called target child selection. And I knew that at age 4. And at age 4, this is the maternal years, the bonding years, where you build trust and intimacy with your parent and you feel protected. And yet that I knew that wasn't true. At age 4, by accident, it wasn't premeditated. She was attacking me and she was a little drunk and she lost her balance and she grabbed onto my right arm and by accident she pulled it out of the socket.
oh,
X well, and I didn't, it's a sharp pain and you can't, whatever. I knew something was wrong. She knew something was wrong. But the funny thing was the very next day, she wakes me up and I'm on the top bunk bed. And I never sleep on the top bunk bed. But I thought this was a way like, hey, I'm going to do something nice for you. So my father came home. He was a firefighter in San Francisco. He gets off shift. He comes home and she makes up this elaborate story and she's crying and she rushes me to the hospital and she's now the story's getting more elaborate to the doctor. And basically she says, he's always wanted to sleep on the top bunk. He's clumsy. He just falls down a lot. But I heard his screaming. And let me see if you can figure this out, detective. I heard screaming, so I jumped out of bed, put on my robe, opened the door, ran down the hallway, opened another door, and he slipped right through my fingers. And I looked at the doctor and he's like, something's odd with the story. And she tells the same story to my father. When I get home, and I got, a tongue depressor and I got my arm in a sling. And my father's a firefighter. Okay. And I looked at mom and it was obvious. You can't do that. Object falls at approximately 127 feet per second. So it's an obvious lie, but I knew at age 4 not to tell the secret. I was like,
Yeah.
next time I at age 8, and this is important, uh, 90% of our psychological makeup is the first 8 to 10 years. Where
Mm.
do you see yourself in the world? How do you think the world sees you? I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to be an attorney. You start thinking of your placement. At age 8, it was premeditated. She burned my arm on a gas stove for several seconds because she basically said, if I'm correct, you've made my life a living hell. I'm going to show you what hell is all about. My two brothers are at their Boy Scout meeting. My father's at work. So we have all the time in the world. And here's the thing, when
Did that
you're,
make any sense to you, though? Why
oh
she
yeah,
would
because
say
I know
something like that?
SOP. Oh, this was SOP. This is standing operating procedure. Because now, starting from age 3 to age 4, we're 4 years into a college degree of torture in a sense. And when she burned my arm, I remember the one thing that saved my life was looking at the bloody kitchen clock. It read 10 minutes to 4. And I'll never forget this. My brothers come home precisely at 4 o'clock, and she never acts this way if there's an audience. So I told myself, I got to steal time. And I stole a second here, a second there. I took a few hits. My brother comes home early at 5 to 4. She throws me downstairs to the basement. And of course, I purge, I cry. For the first time in my life, I cry. But then after I cry, I kind of say, you know what? You're chasing her approval, basically. You're doing all the chores on time. She doesn't feed you. She beats you up, blah, blah, blah. This program is not working. So what I knew at age 8 that I can't change the exterior situation. So I changed it from the inside. And it was very Gone with the Wind-esque. I had blisters from the palm of my hand all the way to my bicep. And I raised my hand up, and I was like taking the Boy Scout pledge in a sense. And I told myself something effective: from this moment on, I will not quit. And I'm going to give everything my bloody best. And now you look at me as an adult, and I've had many accomplishments, many blessings. And it's always that same drive. Publishing is a hard business to break into. I had to learn to speak at age 14, A, B, C, D. I mean, because I didn't speak and I didn't like to look at myself in the mirror when I was in foster care. And the Air Force didn't want a high school dropout who was in foster care. They thought when I was in foster care, you must have been a criminal. I'm like, no. And I couldn't tell them I was abused because I was so afraid. I stayed in the closet in a sense. So at age 8, that perfect timing of self-esteem and doing something for yourself. It's amazing. We live in a society where it's me, and me too, and boo-hoo, wah, wah, wah. And I'm going, you know what? I've never met a cancer patient that comes up and crying and says, I'm a victim of cancer. Bullshit. They say, I'm a fighter and I survived cancer. And if I can survive that, I can survive the flu. I can survive COVID. So that was my situation. I learned how to steal food. I
Mm.
learned about theology at an early age to roll up into a ball. I mean, I just had to learn these things at a very young age. But that's how children think. They're very black and white. They're very linear. And I
Yeah.
would thank goodness I was saved at age 12. I thought that was the weekend my mother was going to kill me. My parents were separated. My 4 other brothers were going to stay at my uncle's house. And she was just starting to lose it. And it was just hours before I was supposed to be home alone with her that my teachers called the police, and they said, "Yep, this is bad." And matter of fact, one teacher was like a Clint Eastwood guy. He was Mr. Ziegler, a male teacher. We didn't have male teachers back then. He was one of the first. He was very Clint Eastwood-esque, eyes in the back of his head, and I know what you're all doing or saying or whatever. And he was a hard-nosed guy on the outside. But this man literally saved my life because he told the principal, if we don't rescue this boy today, this boy ain't coming to school Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday because he'll be dead. And I didn't even know why I was rescued until nearly 20 years later. I was working on a thank you letter at 20 years. I was a state volunteer of the year. I flew for the Air Force, and I have become one of the 10 outstanding young Americans, which is an award that's been given to Howard Hughes and Elvis Presley and Chuck Yeager and, Christopher Reeves, who played Superman, Walt Disney, for goodness sakes. And I was so proud of that. And I was working on the thank you letter, and that eventually became a child called It. So what I did is I went back to the school and I interviewed some of the teachers. And Mr. Ziegler took me out to a dinner, and he told me, and I had completely forgotten why I was rescued. And he told me that I came into school on that one Friday, in first weekend, or first Friday of March, and I came into school with no skin on my arms. And I had completely forgotten that. The Thursday prior to being rescued, my mother had doused my limbs in a mixture of ammonia and Clorox, and it ate the skin. And I remember saying to Mr. Ziegler, gray patches. He says, yeah, you had gray patches. You were flinging them off. And that was the final straw. And at that time, and I'm very embarrassed to say this, I smelled so horrifically, some of the kids would vomit. And they kept my chair closer to the door so that wind, the air can come in. I was stealing lunches from garbage cans. I mean, I was not doing well at all. I wasn't even sleeping. And then psychologically, that's one of the worst things, like
Yeah.
post-traumatic stress and depression and so forth. And I did not know the word suicide or anything about that, but I was so close to dying that weekend. And it's amazing because we're in a society now that we don't like teachers telling our kids what to do. We don't like police officers. We don't like this. We don't like that. I'm going, really? Really? It's not a last action hero mentality. It's just these people are dedicated to their job. And besides your parents and guardians or relatives, who's really raising these kids nowadays? And it is these teachers. And another story, I remember my son came home and he respected his teachers, and he said that no word to a teacher. He says, no, I want a better grade. I want this, I want that. I said, you never say that to teachers, never. They're like, and now he knows, having a young boy himself, how important that is. But again, I just say I was very, very lucky, and I did what I had to do to survive. It's a very linear mentality. I was a prisoner. I was a slave. It was hard. And looking at it
What
now,
I was gonna ask you though, why, ho- like your father never suspected anything that whole time?
of course he did.
Oh,
Father was a very gentle person. And
oh,
I think he was just broken because the mentality was very different in our society. It was the man's job to work and bring home the bacon, and once in a while take out the trash and paint the house. And that's it. And it was my mother's house, my mother's house.
I see.
So, and part of the situation is like, well, I will never forget this. He came home and he was in his duty uniform, and they're both drunk in the morning, and she shoved some ammonia down my throat. Now, this is the second time. The first time I thought, whatever, I don't understand. This is your punishment. Whoop did he do? But it closes off your trachea, your esophagus, and you can't breathe. And I remember thinking, bubble, bubble, bubble. And I remember leaning up against father as she shoves the ammonia down my throat. And I'll never forget this. She said, or dad said, something like, Jesus H. Christ, or what has he done now? And my mother replies, stealing. It, that was my name, it. It is always stealing. It's stealing, it's stealing. And I'm about to black out or die. And my mother slapped me on the back, and I coughed up air. And I'll never forget, she says, Reriva, if you fed the boy more food, maybe he wouldn't steal so much. He knew. The mentality was, one of these days, David, I'm going to have a talk with that woman. One of these days, I'm going to put my foot down. I'll tell you what. And I really believed it because to me as a boy, he was Superman. He had jet black hair. He was 8 feet, 17 inches. You're a kid and your dad's your dad, man. He's a badass firefighter. Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah.
When she stabbed me in the chest at age 9 by accident, it was not premeditated. The knife that she was threatening, but the knife slipped out of her hands and it punctured me in the chest. And she bandaged me up as best she could because I thought, oh my God, the secret's over. I was smiling because I thought, oh my God, you can't hide this. We got to go to the hospital. And the one thing I wanted wasn't food, it was clean sheets. As an adult, I have clean sheet Friday. If I had Oprah Winfrey money, Elon Musk money, I would have clean sheets every fracking day. And I thought, this is over. I love it. Like, okay, they're so soft, so pretty. And I remember, okay, we're going to go to the hospital, but she bandaged me up and she gave me the look like no. And I thought, oh my God, I'll go tell father. So I was supposed to do the dinner dishes, even though I'm still bleeding. And I heard father reading his paper, after dinner paper. And I kind of you can't walk. You kind of like just drag your feet because your abdominal section is just too painful. And I thought, this is my moment. And I remember he heard me and he was hiding behind his paper, kind of shaking the paper. And I said something to the effect like, Mom stabbed me because I stuttered a lot. I didn't talk. And I remember my bleeding onto the carpet, and there was a small pool here, a drip, drip, drip. And his answer, his reply was something like, Jesus H. Christ, I don't want that hell in my house tonight. Go back and do the dishes and try to keep her happy. I don't want anything to do with this. And it
Oh
just
my
broke
gosh.
my spirit because, again, you're thinking Superman. And I'll never
Yeah.
forget, turn my back, and my Superman character was just dead to me. And I can't imagine, and I'm very shameful of this. I wasn't only abused, but my brothers had to live through that. They were scared to death. Okay, what if she kills David and who's she going to pick on next? We call that feeding or T-Rex in a sense. And the fact that, look, what my father went through, my neighbors went through. I'm still ashamed to this very day. I will not deliberately meet any of the kids I went to school with back then. I'm just too ashamed as an adult. And I went back to school there at least once a year after my 20-year anniversary. And I would, do in-service trainings, comedy or fundraising in the entire area. It started with one day and it was called Pelzer Palooza because we waited a 7-day Pelzer fest. But I will not meet with them. I am too ashamed. So you have to think about the small bomb. It's not just the kid being abused, but the collateral damage that radiates around it,
Did
you
your
know?
siblings ever fight for you or help
How
you
could
or
they? How could they? They were brainwashed. Okay. Because one of my brothers saw me get stabbed. And then one time when my parents separated, she was just beating the crap out of me. And he's like, what are you doing to your son, David? And her attitude was like, hey, if you're going to be bad, I'll treat you just like that too. And after a while, after brainwashing, I mean, it got to the point that sometimes my brothers, before I was rescued, would just beat the crap out of me. They believed the tale. The reason why your father isn't here, because it is such a bad child. And if it wasn't here, I'm sure the father would come back. And they're like, F this, screw that. And after like 8 years of seeing this, you're going to believe in the lie in a sense. What does it say? The bigger the lie, the harder it is to disprove. And they're
Hmm.
tired of me stealing food, they were just tired of living under that roof with her. It's very sad, very sad. And it's weird because, and this is very private, but some of my brothers have not had good lives. They haven't. This thing has kind of crippled
Sure,
them in a sense. And
of
and
course.
that's why, again, I'm so, and I don't like to swear, particularly in front of a young lady, but I'm just so damn lucky. I mean, I know I have my faults or triggers, and but overall, for my age, I'm kicking butt. I celebrated my last birthday at age 63. I benched 210 pounds. I'm going, okay, I can still run the mile, elliptical. I'm in great shape for myself. My brain is still functioning after all falling down and injuries and stuff like that. I'm doing pretty good, and I'm not saying I'm proud of myself. I'm just like in awe that I've been allowed to live this life. It's amazing. And I saw it in the fire department. We see great people at their absolutely worst day. And then hopefully you walk home and get it out of your system so you can go on shift and do another good job. And I do have a strong sense of honor and being of service.
I mean, I am to be honest, I've never heard a story like yours in the amount of abuse that you experienced. I mean, did you ever wonder why she picked you specifically? Like, did that ever haunt you as a
It's
kid? Like, what did
it's
I
as a
do?
kid, yes, because I believed in I'm such a bad boy. I'm a bad boy. I really thought because when you're, I think Richard Nixon said it, when you're in jail, you write your best memoirs. Why? There's nothing else to do. So I'd be
That's
the boy in
true.
the basement and I'd try to say, what did I do wrong? Because I'm a bad boy. And I thought, you know what it is? It's one kid in every family that's a bad boy. Because girls aren't bad, boys are bad. And I thought maybe there's one kid in the city that's the bad boy. Maybe there's one kid on the planet that's bad. I happen to be a bad boy. I thought it was justified. I really did. And
Mm,
my brothers thought so too. And after, I mean, in the beginning, like I'd be in the basement and they'd take one piece of bread, throw mayonnaise on it, fold it, and they'd throw it down for me. And that was my airmail mayonnaise sandwich. Or, like we'd pass in the hallway, like, you okay? Yeah, I'm all right. Okay, man. But after so many years, they'd kick and scream and, beat me up a little bit because they believed in it. And what we call this is target child selection, in which the perpetrator, a pedophile, eeny, meeny, miny, hey, mo, they just someone they pick out. My example is junior high prom dance. Boys are nervous, girls are nervous. And if a boy selects a girl to dance, even if it's the worst dancer in the world, there's a 90% chance that she'll dance with him again because they already have an established relationship in a sense. So
mm.
she had an established relationship with me probably before age 4. I strongly believe that. And I happen to be it. Pardon the pun. And it's really sad. And this is important for your audience to know. Um, The second book came out, The Lost Boy, and it was about my time in foster care. And what I wanted to do as a writer, because when I write, I feel like I'm a movie director, like a Spielberg or a Christopher Nolan. I'm very conscious of the setting of the story. So I wanted to write a story about what happens when a child is on planet Mars and gets beamed to planet Earth, doesn't hold any currency, doesn't understand the ways of the world. And how did these people build up this child? And that book became a bestseller as well. And it was dedicated to social workers, foster parents, and my teachers. And one of my foster mothers, my first permanent foster home was Miss Catanz, an Italian lady, big lady, very flamboyant, great cook, fantastic. And I remember the staff took a call and said, Mr. Pelzer, Miss Catanz is on the line. Do you want to talk to her? And I says, no, I can't because I didn't want to go back there in a sense. And Miss Catanz and one of the ladies holding the phone so I can kind of listen. She said she was very nice. She said, we had lots of kids, and we always remember little David. And he was a little rambunctious and getting into trouble as all little boys do at that age. And then she changed her voice. She says, I want you to know I met Mrs. Pelzer twice. And we had hundreds and hundreds of children, and their parents would come over once in a while. I met her twice, and I can hear her crying. Absolute evil is what Miss Catan said. And the lady held the phone, dropped it, and we're all looking at each other like, oh my God, pick up the phone. Don't think we're, disrespecting Miss Catan. And the way she said it is just blood curdling. She just said absolute evil. And I don't think anything could have saved my mother. Even in today, with all the medicine and Xanax or Prozac or whatever, or all the institutions, the thing that I didn't know at the time, and again, I'm a voyeur, and I interviewed my grandmother. My grandmother used to call my mother for 3 or 4 hours every day. You're doing it wrong. You're going to hell in a handbasket. Back in my day, da da da. She would just beat up my mom psychologically so badly. And this was one of the first memories of grandma. So this had to start at before that, age 3 or 4. And my mother's only retreat was she had this pink worn robe that after all the years, the sweat and whatever is just disgusting. And I didn't know it was vodka she was drinking. We thought she was drinking special water or something. So my mom would put the phone down on the kitchen table. My grandmother's on the phone, blah, 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 for 3 or 4 hours out of whack. So my mother was psychologically abused, if not physically abused as well. And I did more research, and I'm pretty good about this, Agent Scully, because the truth is out there. I was always told, or we were told, that our grandfather passed away. No, my grandparents divorced, and she was a single parent in Salt Lake City, Utah. Wow, isn't that scary? Back in that day, it was men, dogs, and women. And it was my grandmother was very controlling. As a matter of fact, she was very independent. She was, I think, the first principal of a school or a school district. So you can kind of see how that transferred to my mom. And my mom was very tomboy-esque. And the one thing I remember her saying, she couldn't get out of that house fast enough. There was a scene, and the child called it, it's a very loving scene, in which it's Christmas, and my mom would go crazy. The day after Thanksgiving, 12 hours later, every inch of the house had ornaments. We had a Christmas tree, 8 feet tall to the inch. She adored Christmas. And I remember we opened up our presents, and then when grandmother came over, for like a lunch dinner, a brunch dinner, whatever. Oh my God, the kids are running around. They're hellions or this or that. You can see my mom just sees the energy totally changed. And I remember we all said goodbye to grandmother when she pulled away, and mother grabbed us, took us into the basement, into the backyard, and we looked at our gigantic Christmas tree, and it was towering. And it was so beautiful. And I'll never forget this. I think I was like hugging her leg or holding her hand at the same time. And she said, I'm so happy to have a home. I'm so happy to have my home. And then she can run it as she wished. And now you see that dynamic with my father's dynamic in a sense. So it
Mm.
was really sad. And the point of my babbling story is it's so important for me, whether it's a divorce or you lost a loved one, or maybe you were violated or abused. It's so important that I forgive my perpetrator. Because if I don't, I can be trapped into that. Because when you forgive someone who's done you wrong, it's not a sign of weakness, but it really does empower you. And then that's part of the release. Because I deal with a lot of people like, okay, I was abused and this and that, and I'm still being abused. I'm going to stop. Okay, you're on the wrong part of the ship. When you wave goodbye on those ships, those cruise ships, sooner or later you're gonna have to put your arm down and move forward. And a lot of people, unfortunately, they just let it just eat away like cancer. And I try to tell people you survive for a reason. You survive to be happy. Even when you go through a divorce, and that's just the worst, one of the worst things that can happen to people. I get upset when I see married couples who have children and they seem okay and they get a divorce. And one of the spouses says, well, this person this, or she this, and she that. I'm going, stop it. That's cancer. You're going to bring that into your next relationship. And what does that tell you about your kids? What message is that giving to them? So for me, I know she's resting in peace. And the hard thing for me was, uh, uh, my father. I forgive my father, of course, but it's different. When I had a boy, and thinking, God, all dad had to do was take my hand and walk away. And it was very hard for me. But I really believe in the power of forgiveness because that helps me every day, every day. It's like when I work with people who are new into program, alcoholics or drugs and so forth. And I've learned more from them than being per se, the quasi counselor unextraordinaire. It's one day at a time. And sometimes with some people, I tell them 5 minutes. Just give yourself 5 minutes. Take a breather. Take that step back. But it's something that I have to do every day.
Did your when you went into foster care and you were taken from your mom, whatever happened to her? Did you ever see her again, or it was just like you heard about her death,
Well, no, I
decades later?
actually I saw her one time when my father was in the hospital, and I can forgive my mother what she did to me, but the one thing I cannot forgive her for, and I will not, my father was in the hospital for about 4 to 6 months, and she never visited him once. She never even told his firefighter brothers or my uncle and my father were very good friends. She didn't tell anybody. And she finally broke down. I was overseas. I was a new person, new kid in the Air Force. And I got to see my dad. And at the time I saw him, he was not able to talk at all. He had cancer at the neck and throat. And that's my first experience with death. And I was just overwhelmed. And I went to visit her to give her a report. And I remember asking her, I said, why don't you visit? And this is the first time in my life I stepped up as a man, per se, because, like my brother was like, they tried to hit me. And I'm like, go ahead, I'll flip you over. Or my mom would give me a look and I'm like, that doesn't scare me anymore. Okay. And I remember saying, you should visit your husband. You should visit him. And of course, just like, and the best Oscar goes to Mrs. Pelzer. I remember she acted like she was going to faint. And I remember her saying like, I can't visit him because it would be too hard on me. And she started to cry. My brother's like, oh, mom, you made mom cry, dude. But I actually did this. That was 19 at the time when he died, and he died in my arms. And I'm kind of I'm a different agent. I carried my father's. That's all he had was his fireman's badge, a thick leather case and it says retired on it. And he let me have that before he passed away. And I carried that on every single Air Force mission I flew. Birth of my son, meeting the president, something of importance. When I ran with Limp Torch, I had my dad's badge. And on a side note on that, when I became a firefighter, I asked if I can wear my father's shield on your leather helmet, and it had his number on it, and I thought that was kind of cool. And now that I'm retired, I have both of my badges from the two separate districts with my father's badge. But I did get a chance to visit my mother before she passed away. And I kind of am like a Columbo meets Cosmo Kramer from Seinfeld. I never get to the point. I go around the jump and juggle watch. I interviewed my mom for 4 hours, and she didn't know. The best interviews is you're not interviewing, you're just talking. I interviewed her for 4 hours, and that's when she told me that she was not planning to kill me that March before I was rescued. And I kind of what I did is I dropped something on the floor. I dropped my keys or something on the floor, and that's how I signed a submission. So on my hands and knees, I basically looked up at her, and this lady used to be. Some women are so beautiful they don't walk, they float. Their presence is like, oh, breathtaking. When I was a small boy, mother was a queen. She was so beautiful. The house was perfect, too perfect, maybe a little OCD perfect. And she was part of the PTA, and she had a beautiful flower garden. And when I saw her before she passed away, when you walked into the house and you go up a little flight of stairs, I almost threw up. And you're squishing in animal urine from the padding, from the carpet. The walls were like grease because she smoked constantly. And she kept the house closed off. She had two TVs, one stacked on the other. And she was in her throne, a little rocking chair. And you can tell she had soiled herself in the chair. She rarely went to the bathroom or let alone slept in her bed. And here's a person who controlled my life and the lives of my family. And now she has nothing. So it's almost like an opposite. And we see that in stories all over. So at the end of my interview, I'm submitting, and I kind of like, but when they took me away, what happened? And what I'm trying to say is, when this broke, what was your thought? And without even completing my little subterfuge, stuttering, she said, and this is important. She said, David, you have to understand, I was planning to kill it that summer. The only problem I had, David, was where to hide its body, David. And that's, a double negative because in their mind, there was a movie, Bridge on the River Kwai.
Mhm.
Alec Guinness was in it, I think. And it was, I think, based on a true story about these British POWs building this magnificent bridge for the Japanese army. And they thought they're doing a great job because, they said, yeah, medicine will come back and forth. And they didn't understand, no, weapons are going to come back and forth. So the guy had to blow up his own bridge. And his last words, oh my God, what have I done? Uh, who's the guy from Enron? The CEO of Enron. He was convicted, he was sentenced, and someone stuck a mic in his throat and says, well, you lost billions of dollars. You screwed a lot of people over. You're a terrible person. Died. Because he finally accepted the fact, oh my God, I'm a bad person. My mom was going to kill me that summer. And the way she says David as the adult and then thinking of it, she could never justify that we were one and the same. Because had she done that, that might have been too much for her. On the other side of the coin, it took my father about 4 to 6 months to die alone in the hospital. And I'm very honored I got to be with him when he died. I'm very honored about that. My
Y- I'm
mother had a heart
I'm
attack and
I'm
died.
it's crazy to me though that you would go back to interview her. Why did you want to do that?
Like I said, I'm a psychological voyeur. I was scared to death, but at that time I was 27. I had my boy. He's maybe a couple of years old. Yeah, maybe a year and a half, Stephen, a year and a half, who I named after my father. And I was working in juvenile hall while I was flying for the Air Force. And then I was starting to do what's called in-service training, with foster parents and social workers and so forth. I would use my story, but then break it down about resilience or, that type of thing. And to me, that was the final puzzle,
Right.
you know, because I wanted to know, part of it was because my wife at the time said, what are you doing? She can kill you. I'm going, I can defend myself. But it was more psychological. And I just wanted some answers, I
Yeah.
think, you
Yeah.
know, and I'm glad I did it now. I mean, I remember leaving and I had to pull over and throw up. I mean, I felt so disgusted, and looking at her. I mean, she had rheumatoid arthritis, face was bloated, she's got bottles of empty vodka everywhere. So, well, I mean, it's almost like, and again, I'm an Air Force war hero. I got my flight outfit, Top Gun, that type of thing. I had a little cute boy. And it's almost like, without saying anything, I said everything. I mean, I can't imagine, seeing your killer, and seeing what they're reduced to in a sense. But like I was saying, trying to convey is my dad took months to die, and she died overnight. Just a heart attack, went just like that. So she felt no pain, nothing. But again, she had a very, very sad life. And it's amazing too, because my grandmother would be interviewed and it would really tick me off. And I was at a different age, like, I don't want to upset grandma. She would tell the press, she says, I think David's story is more fiction than fact. And she also said, I'm not saying it happened and I'm not saying it didn't happen. And if I'm a reporter, I'm going, but what are you saying? And the joke was because one guy was beating me up in the press. And I said, well, it says, your grandmother says this now. What's your reply to that? And they want a sexy story. They want battle royale, oof. And I try to be very Tom Hanks about my story. And I remember I told this guy one time, I said, you know what? Ask grandmother this question. Who's the first person that notified Child Protective Services? It was my grandmother. And I actually interviewed her for that. She was like, I'm the one that tried to rescue you before you were officially rescued. I'm the one that started the
Wow.
ball. And I'm thinking, okay, so you're turning in your daughter, and yet you're telling me because I was doing a lot of work with child abuse across the state and across the nation, and it was just, it's very bizarre, and I remember one time I was doing a photo thing and they told me, and this sounds terrible, I felt like I'm a young model. They said, take off your shirt. Why? We want to see the scar in your chest. Okay, this is kind of weird. Okay, because I have scars, obviously. And one person said, "Oh, Pelzer's a liar." What? Yeah, he said he was stabbed approximately half an inch in the area of his chest. We measured it, it was 3/8 of an inch. Well, when I was a child, and I'd work out and have pecs, and isn't 3/8 closer than a half an inch? I mean, come on, man. So it's a very weird situation. But again, I've always thought and believed. My story was, I remember when I did A Child Called In, and you always looking for, as a writer, you think you might get published, and you have all these fantasies. It's not like in the movies; it is a grind. And some publisher says, "Wow, can't put it down." However, this book is pornographic violence. I said, "No, it's not. It's not." They didn't like A Child Called It in the beginning because to them they saw abuse, and yet as a film director per se, a writer, film director, I wanted it to be about resilience. And I didn't know that it would have a universal message that it did. I was astounded. My proudest moment was just giving it to my teachers, for God's sakes. I wanted them to feel proud and so forth. But it's
Mm.
it's been a long journey. But at the same time, too, there is not a day or a moment. I mean, I have a cup of coffee and I cherish this. I have clean sheets. I have food. I have beautiful music in the house. My grandson is amazing. He thinks he's Steve McQueen. He's in kindergarten and he has a pose like this. He's got a lollipop in his mouth, like, I am king of the world. My son goes, Dad, you're kind of cool. You're a badass. And Jasper, he's pretty cool. I'm going, yeah, but don't forget, boy, it skips a generation. I mean, I really have an amazing life. I mean, I have forced myself in and out of so many Mission Impossibles. I mean, unbelievable. And I'm at the age right now, this story, if we tell it the right way, and if people can receive it the right way, because it's not about me. It's about, okay, everybody takes a hit. Everybody falls down. Everybody's been wronged. Everybody. But what are you going to do about it? I have 2 words of advice for your audience. Here it is. Be happy. 3 words. Be happy now. Let's go for 4. Be happy now, damn it. People wait until they get Trump Lotto, they get married, they have the house, the kids, the 2 cars, the dogs, whatever. No, no, no. Be happy with what you have now. I did a radio show, internet radio show for many years. I did a show live from Baghdad, which was really cool. And when I was 2008, too big to fail, I wasn't zooming, but I acted like I'm smoking a cigar, and I'm acting like I'm got whiskey, and I said, "Oh my God, I love the Great Recession. I'm having so much fun. This is the best thing for America." And the phones lit up. I said, "You know why? Because we don't need to spend $100 a day on Blu-ray DVDs. Now that we're going to Applebee's once a month, we're appreciated all the more. Every day our kids come home from school without being shot at is a blessing. Every day we're not attacked from folks from overseas. That is a blessing. And I've also kind of said with my little podcast show, it's like, you know what? COVID humbled everybody. None of us were immune, none of us. And now that we have vaccines, isn't that great? Because now all we have to do once a year is get another shot. Once every 2 years, get another shot. It's very humbling. And I just always remember where I came from. And, I'm at the age that I can tell a story or make people laugh or feel good about themselves. And I just want to kind of just say over and over and over, you got to make your own happiness every single day. Don't wait for happiness. Make your own happiness, for gosh sakes. You know, the best thing about being my age and when I was married, love her to death. Coming home after a bad call, because you have bodily fluids and things unbelievable. And I would strip outside day or night, I don't care. Can throw my stuff in the garage, the laundry thing, walk down the hallway, shower, and then put on, let's say, body lotion. And maybe I'd layer myself, put on PJs or put on regular clothes, or at nighttime, just going into and spoon your lover, for goodness sakes. It's always the small things that really, really make a difference. And the key to my life, and this is important for your audience that might be a little bit older than you have to stay busy and you have to have a mission. And you have to have a mission and stay busy every single day. And you have to be useful. The biggest thing I can tell people that are feeling bad about themselves is, you know what? Stop. Look around you. Look around your neighborhoods. I mean, I will never forget this. I was going to the gym and I couldn't even drive my little SUV through this one street because it was RV row for more than 3 miles. RVs because of COVID, and people lost some of their jobs, and little kids living on top of these RVs with little tents and so forth. And again, you stay busy, you be useful. And the biggest thing that we can do if we're feeling down about ourselves is do something for someone else. I have a program. I work 3 times a day. I do 3 nice deeds a day. I want to make people laugh 3 times a day. And I want to promote other people to do something for others as well. And that's great for your mental health. It really is. Because even though COVID is still out there, we're still going to be fighting it for the next 2 generations easily. And it's going to be about mental health. And we've seen some situations where people riot, people just break into stores of flash mob gangs and so forth. People that want to kidnap your governor, hold her prisoner, and do very bad things. I mean, people, when they get scared, they act out. And what I try to do, whether it's your show or my little podcast show, is bring some calm to the table. None of this 3 easy payments of 1995. Lose 10,000 pounds in 2 days or less, or Tinder, Twix, Twerk, or whatever, instantaneous, whatever relationships. It takes time, but we have to do it on a daily basis, I think.
Yeah. You know, first, I mean, David, thank you for sharing all of this of your story. One thing, though, that really intrigues me, I know, is I saw you wearing a cross necklace. Um,
Yes.
you haven't mentioned God at all, and I wondered, like, did any of this result in any sort of religious, like, did you
Well,
ever?
I was raised that a Catholic, and I was raised that God loved children. And I swear to goodness, when I was before I was banished to the basement, I would pray in the morning, like, let me be a good boy, let me run fast, let me do all the dishes, let me do this, that, and let help me, God. And I saw a rainbow one time when I was praying. I thought, oh my God, God lives at the end of the rainbow. And even when I lived in the basement, I slept on this army cot, no blankets. So I would take rags and I found out about heat, put them under your arms, put them in your groin area. And I would try to have like a little tent. And I would always pray to God. And toward the end, I think it was that Thursday night when I knew, I thought my mother was going to kill me that Friday weekend. I actually swore to God. I said, you know what? I didn't say F you. I said, screw you, basically. And like, you've heard me, you've seen me, you see everything. And I thought you loved kids. And I'm not a bad kid. I really try to do everything I can and I've got nothing left. And I wasn't sleeping back then. And that was like, I was so close to death. I could have just dropped. And I will never forget this. I kind of said, screw you, God. And I was so mad. And then I said the Lord's Prayer real quick before I tried to go to sleep. But I do believe in a connection. And I don't want to overdo this because I'm trying to be careful here. Is I believe that God talks to at least twice in our lives. You know, and I believe this sense like, have you ever been in a situation where you were down and out of nowhere you get a text from a friend you haven't heard for years, and they tell you something, and maybe you bump into a friend and they tell you the same thing in a period of a few days. To me, that's God knocking on your door. And sometimes you'll get a lot of texts or a lot of people say something that's the exact same thing, and I think that's God screaming at you. And I tell this when I work with young people. I say, God's busy. He's got other things to do. He or she is busy trying to solve real problems. So you've got to basically let God in your heart and walk with God in a sense. And I've been very, very lucky, very fortunate. This was given to me many years ago, and I was in Iraq one time, and they said, "Chief, you got to take off the cross." I'm going, "What?" Middle East. That's when this whole thing started. Jesus and so forth, and his friends. And I said, "Why do you want me to take it off, son?" "Chief, you might make the terrorist upset." I think we're kind of past that point, for goodness sakes. Yeah, oh my goodness. And I was kind of like a cross between, what's his name, Tony Stark and Robin Williams when I was overseas. We had the fun V, not the drum V, but the fun V. We had the music going, whoop, whoop, whoop. And I remember one time I took the blowhorn and said, "You, Al Qaeda, drop down your weapons, come to the green zone. Blues Brothers, News and Blues Review. It's all free. And yes, we're serving cheeseburgers with bacon, extra bacon for you, okay?" You do little things like that. It's unexpected. And as a fire captain, I would sometimes have the most off-colored jokes, because you're dealing with a bad situation, but at the same time,
Sure.
it's a release. It's
Yeah.
not being disrespectful. And again, I am fairly spiritual, but I try not to, you know, act like, and I definitely don't do that. I don't act like I walk on water either, like some of these other people I know. And I work my own program. And again, I'm just a very fortunate person. And I say this over and over. I know where I'm at. I know how blessed I am, and I know exactly where I came from. And I do that with every ounce of food. So there's that.
Yeah. I was just thinking because you've said that a couple times, you know where you've been. Do you know like where you're gonna go? Like
Well,
when
my
it's
my
time
my
for you
last
to die. I've always
word,
wondered, I've asked so many different people and they all have so many different perspectives. Do you have as much confidence about that as you do about where you came from?
what's weird is I'm going to be 64 here in a couple of weeks, and I definitely don't look it or act it. I really don't. And I
No.
remember when I was in foster care, they said, "Oh, you're going to be blessed." I'm going, "Well, what do you mean, Doc?" He says, "Because I didn't play in the sun." He said, you're underdeveloped. Your body is going to be like 4 to 6 years behind. So I'm going, that sucks. I want to grow up now, have some fun here. But at age 64, I still think that when I can be useful, whether it's doing a show like yours or, definitely, because I do help out in my community. I'm very involved in my community. I'm proud because I was at a certain stage where I did fundraisers or I gave away a lot of money. And I found out quickly, even though I gave a certain amount of money, only 10% actually went to a cause. I'm going, what? And now I can feed people directly and I get to know them and their stories or their personalities, or, make sure they have socks or, rain jackets and so forth. I think I can still be useful for that. And, the blessing to have my grandson, that keeps you active and it's weird. I said, all right, for the first 5 years, he's going to be spoiled. After that, he's going to earn his keep. Okay. Just because he wants a Hot Wheel doesn't mean he's going to get a Hot Wheel. Okay. So it's like, I'm going to be the Nazi guy, right? You're going to be a good boy and you're going to open up doors for ladies and say, Miss, ma'am, and sir, and you're going to be a person of service, so that's going to kind of keep me busy. And my last prayer before I go to bed is a request. I says, give me one more mission. I feel like the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible guy, like let Ethan Hunt have one more mission and I say, let me be of service. So I'm still waiting for that answer. But I just think for now, I'm just kind of like just in the moment. I do Sudoku and play my little keyboard. And I have four turtles. The family names the turtles. They've all got different personalities. And I think that's the perfect pet for me because they're cold-blooded, they don't have ears, and they're always hiding in their shell. So this is the perfect relationship for me, for goodness sakes. But it's like people, they say, "Oh, I want to fall in love, fall in love." Say, no, 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 forget about it. Okay. Love will come to you. You can turn a corner and there it is. You don't plan it, it just happens. And most of the things in my life, I never expected them to happen. So I'm just trying to, I'm a little on cruise control right now and just doing my little thing. But I also think too, it's important for me at this time in my juncture to kind of start doing things for me. I make it a point to work out and I walk around or I'll chip or putt, golf, whatever, and I'm doing those kind of things or seeing the family and stuff like that rather than doing, 16 hours a day for everybody else, not, not knowing if the seed will, take root per se. I'm doing this now, but I'm kind of sure because there is the slightest possibility that they might make the first book into a movie. And if that happens, I'll be involved with that. And I'm such a movie buff. Oh my goodness. The Citizen Kane, Casablanca. Oh my gosh. So maybe we do that, or maybe God just wants me to do what I'm doing right now. Because like you said, some of your listeners of your generation may not have heard this story. And again, the story is not about me as much as it's about, okay, bad things happen. What are you going to do? Because you never
Yeah.
know who you are until you're psychologically pushed up against that wall. And the one thing I will say about our great country is I expected Mad Max when COVID hit. When I say Mad Max, people ripping off food trucks or, robbing banks or, going to, ripping off the tanker trucks for fuel. And to my knowledge, that only happened once. And it didn't get a lot of press, thank God. But I think America, it's like 9/11. When bad things happen, we have a tendency to pull together, work together. The beautiful thing I saw during the first weeks of COVID is my good friends from New York City at 6 o'clock PM, they bang on their pots and pans because that was the shift change for the nurses and the doctors. It was just a little thing. It started with one apartment building, and then it was like a mile or so long. And everybody waving, "Hey, we got you." And I was very fortunate because my teachers had my back,
Mhm.
and my foster parents. I mean, if you're looking at a person who's semi-articulate and having the life that I've had, that was that because of my foster parents and my social workers, and that was by the grace of God. And sometimes they were firm with me, and they needed to be firm with me, but I was loved unconditionally. And I'm very embarrassed to say this, but I was a mess. I was a
Yeah.
terrible, I just was like not an animal, but animal-like. I just was frightened of everything. The police officer stayed with me and he held my hand because I thought my mom was going to find me. I thought she was going to shoot the police officer and just whisk me away. I mean, it was a very dramatic rescue in a sense.
Yeah.
And the tribute, I guess, it also goes to my son and now his son in a sense. So there's
Yeah.
there's lots of things that connect. Lots of things, it's not about me. And I got to tell you, I'm just happy to be here. I just want to be a good person and I want to hopefully, make a difference. And sometimes I have doubts. And this morning we were, the lady who works with me, you've spoken to her, my director, Miss Esty. I actually said, I don't know if we're making a difference, boss. Let's look at this. And she says, Dave, you should see what the letters we get and the emails and blah, blah, blah. And then a few minutes later, I spoke to this beautiful lady in Philadelphia, and we're going to help her out. Next week we're going to do a show for her, and she works with ladies that are being released from prison because they had childhood traumas and they did things, whether it was drugs or other crimes, and we're going to work with them so they can get on their way in a sense. And it's like I made a new friend today, and that makes me happy because I know this lady. She's a doctor, and she says, I doubt myself. I said, sweetheart, you've been doing this for what, 3 generations now? They've named some of their kids after you, for goodness sakes. Tell me you're not making a difference. And it doesn't have to be grand. Like I say, sometimes I remember Mr. Ziegler before I was rescued. I was scared to death. I hated Fridays, and I never say the H word. I don't like that word. I was so scared on Fridays because I knew I wouldn't get food until Monday morning when I'm stealing from the kids before school starts. And my mom used to just whoop on me on the weekends. And I'll never forget this. One time he went like this. He put his hand on my shoulder and, uh, good job, Pelzer. Keep up the good work now, son. Nothing. But to me, it was like a sponge. Oh my God, he knows my name. He said a good thing about me. Oh my God. And when I interviewed Mr. Ziegler, before he told me about my arms being burned from the ammonia Clorox, I said, Mr. Ziegler, call me Steve. I said, I can't do that. You're my teacher. You're always my teacher. I said, sir, you touched me on the shoulder one time and you said da 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 da. And he goes, son, I don't recall that. I don't remember that. And I swear to goodness, I looked him straight in the eye. I said, but sir, I do. See, it may be nothing to you to open up a door for someone or to give them the nod. See, I'm old. I can give everybody the nod. Or whenever I go to Mickey D's, if I see someone that's not doing too well, I get them the same meal I'm having. If anything, they get an extra, Big Mac for God's sakes, and that it's nothing to you. It's 5, $10. Or you open up a door for someone, but you give people a sense of value because
Yeah.
you never know what the hell they're going through. And that can be that turning point. All it was a bloody phone call. My teachers went in to see Mr. Hanson, the school principal. Ziegler stood up, called the police now. It's just a phone call. The police looked at me like, oh, yeah, he's in custody right now. And we fled the area. Code 3 lights, going to the hospital, for God's sakes. It's just the small thing to you. It's like being a firefighter. Everybody says, oh, you guys are heroes. You guys are this and that. I say, no, we're just doing our job. We're just doing what we're supposed to be doing. See? It's about
Yeah.
being of that little bit of service. It can change the world in a sense. Because look what it did for my family. My son's a good boy. Went in law enforcement. His wife's in law enforcement. And they have the most amazing kid on the planet. He's again Steve McQueen. He's cool, and he's only in kindergarten. Oh my God, player! That he's got that curly blonde hair, Samson and whatever. He's going to be a player. We're going to have a big talk with him.
Well, Steve, I mean, oh my gosh, wow. Well, Dave, I mean, thank you so much. I mean, I'm processing and
It's it,
thinking
it
and I'm
is
like,
it is a process.
wow, what a
I'm
story.
not your typical, go buy my book or I'm awesome, type thing. But I have to say this before I forget. I pray that your audience knows how damn lucky they are. Because let's call this like it is now, right? I'm gonna go Gran Torino here. Clint Eastwood-esque. You're a young lady. You're a smart lady. You can be doing anything that you want. And the fact that you have 150 shows under your belt, you're a person of service. And I hope your audience recognizes that. And whether they like us talking back and forth or they hate my guts, I don't care. But the fact that you're out there leading quietly, trying to make a change and trying to help others to become the best that they can, that is a kudo to you, young lady.
Well, thank you. I think that's the best compliment I've gotten in a while, so I appreciate it. Well, thank you
Your
so
parents did well.
much. And for listeners, I'll have a link to Dave's website so you can, if you haven't read his book, go ahead and look into it. And obviously, as he said, it's a heavy hitting book, so it for those who've had and experienced violence, it may be triggering to you, so that's something to think about. But he has a lot of other books as well, so if that one would be difficult, there's some other books that detail later in his life that you might be able to read and that might be a little less heavy hitting, but um regardless, there's a lot of information on his website, and so I'll be posting that along with this episode. But thank you so much, Dave. It was a gift to meet you.
Well, if you can tell your parents I said hello, and my message is they did well. And that's the highest compliment I can give a young person. So thank you for that you do and for your audience and your family. Happy holidays. Please be safe and make the difference.
Thank you so much. You too.
Bye bye.